be interested in defunding and taking away taxpayer dollars to NPR and PBS?
Well, I would love to do that. I think it's very unfair. It's been very biased for the whole group. I mean, a whole group of them. And they spend more money than any other network of its type ever conceived. So the kind of money that's being wasted, and it's a very biased.
There you go. President Trump slamming NPR and PBS yesterday, saying that he would love for DOJ to take away federal funding. The House Oversight's DOJ subcommittee holding a hearing today with the presidents of both of those networks. The hearing said to assess whether the American taxpayer should keep subsidizing those outlets. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which helps fund NPR and PBS, received more than $530 million in federal money last year, taxpayer dollars. More than $350 million of that money went to TV grants and programming. $90 million went to radio. Joining me right now is Kentucky Congressman and the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer. Mr. Chairman, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning, Maria.
Tell us what you want to get to the bottom of today in this hearing.
Well, this is going to be the one opportunity PBS and NPR have to come in front of Congress and try to justify all the federal funding that they get. I think it's going to be a tough sell for them. We're going to have a lot of information that we just copied and pasted from their website, stories that they've reported over the years that are just incorrect. And, you know, if you look at what President Trump said, the amount of money that they get is breathtaking, and the quality of product that they produce, that's going to be the topic of this conversation today in front of the committee. They're going to have to justify the money they got, and I think they're going to have a tough sell.
Yeah, I mean, they're also, of course, very critical of President Trump. I don't know if this is going to come up, but this was very striking, and really, I was struck by this incident, and I want to know if you agree and whether or not this comes up. This seems to me it could have been real dangerous. Watch this. Trump is talking to reporters, and a reporter is in the group with her microphone, and the microphone hits President Trump in the face. And, you know, he was very cool about it and didn't really say much, but her microphone hit him in the face. I believe that was an NPR reporter. Do you remember what I'm referring to?
I do remember, and I'll tell you, what we're seeing traveling America right now, and whether it's in Kentucky or whether it's in New Jersey, you've got a hostile media. They believe what they're saying, which is usually not correct, and they're jacked up. You know, when I see them in the hall here in Washington, they're hostile. Their eyes are bugged out of their head, and I'm sure when you take Trump, you can multiply that times 10 with their hostility. So it is a dangerous situation, and we are concerned about that because President Trump is very accessible to the media, and you know, I think that's something that the Secret Service is going to have to take extra precaution about, because a lot of these people that work for these media outlets, they're you know, sense of rage and their anger and the belief that they actually believe with what they're saying when they're reporting this liberal nonsense is probably not a good situation for President Trump.
I mean, you know, that could have been, I mean, an adversary could have used that against somebody putting something on that microphone. It actually hit him in the face. That's dangerous. He handled it very cool and collective. Was that an NPR reporter's microphone? Do we know for sure?
I heard that it was, but we're gonna find out today. That's one of the things we're gonna try to find out before the hearing, because we have a member that's wanting to ask about that. So hopefully we'll know the answer in a few hours.
That was just extraordinary to see that and watch how the president handled that. By the way, microphone comes and just smacks him in the face. Meanwhile, the House Oversight Committee advancing several bills yesterday. Actions included fast-tracking the president's government reorganization plans, nullifying Washington, D.C. sanctuary city status, protecting American taxpayers. Congressman, your legislation called the Reorganizing Government Act of 2025 made it out of committee. Tell us where this heads next.
Well, it's going to head to the House floor, and this is another tool that President Trump needs. Other presidents have asked for this same legislation. The Democrats supported this legislation when Barack Obama was president, but lo and behold, they don't support it now. You know, every president wants to reorganize government, and they should. That's the problem with Washington, D.C. These Democrats create these government programs and government agencies that are supposed to be temporary, or they're supposed to be safety nets, and they turn into entitlements, and they don't ever want to change anything. If you want to change something, then the media and the liberals attack you as making cuts to the poor and to the needy. Donald Trump got a mandate from the American people to reform government. This government needs reform, and my legislation will help codify and make it easier with what President Trump's trying to do to shrink the size of government and make government more efficient to the taxpayers.
Yeah, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is demanding an investigation now into that Signal group chat leak. Other Democrats want National Security Advisor Michael Waltz and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to resign, they claim. The president, of course, is standing by them. But I want to get your take on this. You know, in 2017, I know you know this, Virginia Senator Mark Warner also used the Signal app to set up contact with former British spy Christopher Steele so that they could try to take down Trump. Of course, he infamously compiled the unverified Steele dossier, which was a bunch of embellishment and lies, claiming Trump was a Russian asset. Mr. Chairman, that story went viral across the world, ripped the country apart. And here you have Mark Warner now telling us how dangerous this chat was. Your reaction?
Well, the Democrats' hypocrisy knows no bounds. But with respect to this, you know, it's certainly not good. I do think Mike Waltz needs to come forward and explain what happened. It's my understanding that there wasn't classified information that was shared. You know, at the end of the day, it's something that doesn't need to happen. And I do think they need to kind of explain what happened and explain to the American people how it'll never happen again. But, you know, it's certainly not a good situation, but I don't think it rises to the level of termination or anything like that.
Are you investigating how something like this could happen?
I think the Armed Services Committee.
It was just a simple mistake.
I think it's a simple mistake, but again, I think that Mike Waltz, who is a great member of my House Oversight Committee, I think he needs to explain to the American people what happened. And you know, again, from what I've seen, Maria, it was not classified information. It did not put our troops in peril. I think the media, as you can imagine, has taken this story and, you know, dramatized it and put a couple of zeros at the end of it. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to stand here and say it was good. It shouldn't have happened, and they certainly need to be more careful. All
right. Well, we're looking forward to this hearing today. And I want to run this video once more. I'm not sure if our audience understood exactly what happened. So we have the sound and the video of the day that President Trump opened himself up talking to reporters, and an NPR reporter stuck his microphone on his face. Watch this.
Mr. President, obviously you're concerned.
She just became a big story.
Yeah. Congressman, is this going to be in focus today?
Well, we're going to find out first and make sure that that was an NPR reporter. If it is, that's going to be a question, because as you said, there could have been something put on that microphone. I mean, there's a lot of concerns about that, and I think that's something that the Secret Service needs to take into account. Those reporters don't need to be able to reach out and touch him. You know, it's not a reporter. That wasn't an actual reporter. That was someone, a camera person, a staff person. So that's something that never should have happened. And again, it shows how calm and cool President Trump is under pressure. He didn't flinch. I can only imagine what Kamala Harris would have done in that situation.
Yeah, he handled it very well, but still a dangerous moment. Congressman, good to see you this morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.